No matter how many times it happens, aviation disasters are always appalling and usually involve a huge loss of life. However, if one good thing can come of this, is these accidents tend to prompt the passing of new laws and regulations as well as changes to aviation procedures, and thanks to this, flying has never been safer today. With that said, here are the 5 worst disasters in aviation history. Air India Flight 182. On June 23, 1985, the Air India Boeing 747 departed from Toronto, Canada for a journey that was scheduled to include stopovers at Mirabel Airport in Montreal, London's Heathrow Airport, as well as Palam and Sahar International Airport. Soon after departing from Toronto, Flight 181 touched down without incident at Montreal Mirabel International Airport. While there, the Boeing 747's flight number became Flight 182. After additional passengers boarded, Flight 182 embarked on its next leg of the journey to England. 6 hours later, while in Irish airspace, Flight 182 made brief contact with the Shannon International Airport air traffic control before vanishing from the radar screen. A bomb had detonated in the front cargo hold of Flight 182 at an altitude of 31,000 feet. The explosion caused rapid decompression, which led to a mid-air breakup of the aircraft. All 307 passengers and 22 crew died. Later investigations would reveal the terrorist group Baba Khalsa is the main culprit in the bombing, but to make sense of how and why this happened, we have to go back several years. In the late 1970s, India was embroiled in violent civil unrest between Sikh and Hindu factions. The Baba Khalsa formed after a violent clash during the festival of Vaisakhi in India on April 13, 1978, resulting in 13 Sikhs being killed. Yalwinder Singh Parmar, the leader of Baba Khalsa, had sworn to avenge the death of Sikhs. The violent civil unrest continued until its culmination in June 1984. On June 3, 1984, the Prime Minister of India ordered Operation Blue Star, the storming of the Golden Temple where Sikh militants had amassed weapons. Both sides suffered heavy casualties, and soon after Operation Blue Star, Parmar visited an auto mechanic and electrician in Injit Singh Riyadh. This would turn out to be the beginning of the plot to blow up Air India Flight 182. On the day of the crash, a man called Manjit Singh asked a check-in agent to check his suitcase and have it transferred to Air India Flight 181 and 182. The agent initially refused as it was against protocol, but eventually relented and accepted the baggage. Only after the crash did the agent realize the deception had allowed the suitcase containing the bomb to get onto Flight 182. By then, it was too late. In the final report released in 2010, investigators concluded that the bombing of Air India Flight 182 resulted from a cascading series of errors, including the breach of luggage check-in procedures, the malfunction of bomb-detecting X-ray equipment, but most importantly, the failure of Canadian intelligence and security agencies to share information and heed warnings from other government agencies. Till this day, the bombing of Air India Flight 182 remains the largest mass murder in Canadian history. Turkish Airlines Flight 981. Turkish Airlines Flight 981 was a regularly scheduled flight from Istanbul to London's Heathrow Airport, with a stopover in Orly International Airport in Paris. On the morning of March 3, 1974, Flight 981 flew its first leg, landing at Orly International Airport shortly after 11 AM local time. Due to strike action by British European Airways, many stranded passengers were booked onto Flight 981, including 17 English rugby players, 6 fashion models from Britain, and 48 Japanese bank management trainees. After a slight delay, Flight 981 departed for London with 335 passengers and 11 crew on board. Shortly after Flight 981 passed over the town of Mo just after 12:40 PM, the rear left cargo door blew off. The sudden change in air pressure between the cargo hold and the passenger cabin ripped a hole in the cabin floor above the open hatch and caused a section of cabin floor as well as 6 occupied passenger seats to be ejected from the aircraft, but the worst was to come. As Captain Najat Berkoz, First Officer Ora Alusman and Flight Engineer Hussein Oza fought to regain control of the plane, the aircraft started to pitch down and picked up speed. Unbeknownst to the flight crew, when the cargo door blew off, it also completely severed primary and backup control cables that ran below the cabin floor. The pilots have now lost the ability to control the plane's elevators, rudder, and number 2 and 3 engines, which meant they have lost control of the aircraft entirely. 77 seconds after the cargo door blew off, Turkish Airlines Flight 981 crashed into the Erminovilla forest at speeds of 800 km an hour. The force of the impact was so great that the plane disintegrated into millions of pieces instantly. All 346 passengers and crew died. Later investigations revealed that the crash was caused by the structure failure of the door latching mechanism due to incorrect engagement. Investigators found the cargo doors could be closed and locked when the necessary latches and pins were not in place, causing the cargo door to be blown off and setting off an explosive decompression. Today, a monument can be found in the center of the forest in memorial of the crash victims of Turkish Airlines Flight 981. Chakidadri, India. November 12, 1996. Saudi Arabian Airlines Flight 763 was en route from Delhi, India to Darin in Saudi Arabia, and Kazakhstan Airlines Aviation 276 en route from Shymkent, Kazakhstan to Delhi, India. Saudi Arabian Airlines Flight 763 was due to embark on the first leg of its journey, departing from Delhi at 1832 local time. The Kazakhstan flight was at the same time descending to land at Delhi. As the Saudi plane departed, it was clear to climb to 14,000 feet, while the Kazakhstan flight, only 137 kilometers from its destination, was cleared to descend to 15,000 feet. 8 minutes later, the Kazakhstan aircraft reported to have reached the assigned altitude of 15,000 feet, but was actually lower at 14,500 feet and continued to descend. By this time, the air traffic controller by the name of VK Datta realized, since both of these aircrafts are operating in the same airway but in different directions, a collision is likely given the Kazakhstan aircraft's continual descent. Datta immediately advised the Kazakhstan aircraft that there is a Saudi Boeing 747 in the 12 o'clock direction. By now, the Kazakhstan flight was only 19 kilometers from its destination. By now, it was too late. Looking at his radar screen, Datta noticed two blips merging but not separating. Then seconds later, both blips disappeared. The two aircrafts had collided. The tail of the Kazakhstan aircraft sliced through the left wing and horizontal stabilizer of the Saudi Boeing 747. Suffering critical damage, the Saudi airplane quickly spiraled out of control towards the ground. Due to extreme stress on the fuselage, the aircraft broke up in midair, then crashed to the ground at over 1,100 kilometers an hour. The Kazakhstan aircraft did not break up, but with the extreme damage suffered, it went into a steep dive until it crashed in a field. The crash killed all 349 passengers and crew on board both planes. In their final report, investigators determined the Kazakhstan aircraft was at fault. The flight crew did not obey the assigned altitude of 15,000 feet. Instead, they continued to descend straight into the path of the Saudi Boeing 747. In a cruel twist of fate, it was also revealed that a few seconds before the collision, the flight crew on the Kazakhstan aircraft realized they were not at the assigned altitude of 15,000 feet, and the captain gave orders to climb, unfortunately climbing right into the Saudi aircraft. Had the Kazakhstan aircraft not made that climb, it is very likely that they would have passed under the Saudi plane. The Chakidadri accident is till this day the world's deadliest mid-air collision. Japan Airlines Flight 123. Japan Airlines Flight 123 was a scheduled domestic flight from Haneda Airport in Tokyo to Osaka International Airport. On August 12, 1985 at 4:50 p.m., Japan Airlines Flight 123 landed at Haneda Airport, having just completed the fourth of its 6 planned flights of the day. After being delayed for more than an hour, Flight 123 left the gate at 6:04 p.m. and got ready for the 5th flight of the day. The flight crew consisted of Captain Masami Takahama, a veteran pilot with 12,400 total flight hours, First Officer Yutaka Sasaki with 4,000 total flight hours, and the veteran flight engineer Hiroshi Fukuda with 9,800 total flight hours. Flight 123 took off for Osaka International Airport at 6:12 p.m. with a total of 524 passengers and crew. 12 minutes into the flight and almost at cruising altitude, the aircraft suffered an explosive decompression, causing pressurized air to rush out of the passenger cabin into the unpressurized fuselage. The sheer amount of force exerted by the explosive decompression had ejected the aircraft's vertical stabilizer and in the process severed all 4 hydraulic control cables. As pressurized air rapidly escapes the passenger cabin, oxygen masks were dropped to compensate for the lack of oxygen. The rupture caused hydraulic fluid to rapidly drain from the aircraft, rendering the hydraulic controls completely unresponsive. The aircraft is now stuck in a cycle of pitching up and climbing, then pitching down and entering terrifying dives. As the flight crew continued the battle to keep the aircraft flying, the aircraft controls became increasingly unresponsive. 32 minutes later, despite the unwavering and valiant efforts of the flight crew, Flight 123 entered an uncontrollable descent into the forests of Mount Takamagahara. Japan Airlines Flight 123 crashed into the mountains, then flipped and landed on its back. Out of the 524 people on board, only 4 survived. Later investigations revealed the cause of the crash was due to an improper repair performed after a tail strike incident 7 years ago. In order to repair the bulkhead damage in the incident, a splice plate needed to be inserted, then secured with 3 rows of rivets. Instead of following standard procedure of using one continuous splice plate, the technicians used 2 separate splice plates, one plate with 2 rows of rivets and the other one with only 1 row. The faulty repair essentially negated the effectiveness of one of the rows of rivets and severely compromised the plane's airworthiness. When the bulkhead gave away due to metal fatigue, the resulting explosive decompression severed control cables of all 4 hydraulic systems and ejected the vertical stabilizer. With the loss of flight controls, the aircraft became uncontrollable. It's worth mentioning that during a simulator reenactment with the same mechanical failures suffered by Flight 123, none of the 4 flight crews in the simulation managed to keep the plane in the air for as long as 32 minutes achieved by the actual crew of Flight 123. The crash of Japan Airlines Flight 123 remains the deadliest single aircraft accident in history. A monument has been set up in Fujioka in memory of those that died in the accident. The Tenerife Disaster. The Tenerife Disaster is perhaps one of the most well-known accidents in aviation history. March 27, 1977. Pan Am Flight 1736 originating from Los Angeles International Airport and KLM Flight 4805 originating from Amsterdam were both en route to Gran Canaria Airport on the Canary Islands in Spain. At 1:15 in the afternoon, the Gran Canaria Airport was shut down due to a bomb threat, and all incoming flights were diverted to the nearby Los Rodeos Airport, now known as the Tenerife North Airport. The Tenerife Airport was a regional airport and had only one runway and one major taxiway parallel to it, with 4 connecting taxiways. The airport was never designed to accommodate an influx of large aircrafts, so due to space limitations, the main taxiway was used to temporarily park these aircrafts. This meant that all departing aircraft had to taxi along the runway in order to position themselves for takeoff. After Gran Canaria Airport was reopened, the control tower at Tenerife Airport instructed KLM Flight 4805 to taxi along the runway, then make a 180-degree turn to get into takeoff position. Shortly after, Pan Am Flight 1736 was instructed to follow the KLM down the same runway, then take the 3rd exit C3 on their left, then continue towards the runway. The Pan Am crew successfully identified the first 2 taxiways, but had trouble finding the 3rd due to a lack of markings and poor visibility, therefore they continued to taxi down the runway. The weather conditions were rapidly deteriorating, and by the time the Pan Am aircraft was on the runway, visibility was less than 100 meters. KLM Flight 4805 was now in position to take off, and after a 3.5-hour delay, Captain Van Zanten of the KLM aircraft was eager to depart. Upon calling air traffic control, they were instructed to wait. But they don't. Instead, Captain Van Zanten accelerates the plane down the runway. Due to intense fog, neither crew was able to see the other plane on the runway. To make matters worse, neither aircraft could be seen from the control tower, and no ground radar was installed at the airport. The KLM Jumbo is now hurtling down the runway towards the Pan Am aircraft. Upon spotting KLM's landing lights through the fog, the Pan Am pilot applied maximum power to the throttles and made a sharp left turn to avoid collision, but it's too late. The KLM smashes into the Pan Am aircraft at speeds of 290 km per hour and slicing off the upper deck of the Pan Am. After the impact, the KLM crashes further down the runway and burst into flames. All 234 passengers and 14 crew aboard the KLM perished, as did 326 passengers and 9 crew members on the Pan Am. Only 61 people on the Pan Am aircraft survived, including the captain, first officer and flight engineer. Later investigations attributed the crash to a serious error of judgment by Captain Van Zenten of the KLM aircraft. By reviewing the air traffic controller tapes, it was revealed that when the KLM called the control tower, the controller relayed information about the route the KLM was to follow after takeoff, but did not specifically give clearance for takeoff. The KLM flight crew responded with, "We are now at takeoff," which the controller responded with, "Okay." This reply led to the KLM thinking clearance for takeoff had been given. The last instruction from the control tower to the KLM was, "Okay, stand by for takeoff, I will call you," indicating clearly that takeoff clearance had not been given. However, at the same time, a radio call from the Pan Am caused an interference which caused the KLM crew to miss this crucial message. The Pan Am's transmission was, "We're still taxiing down the runway, the Clipper 1736, but again, this message was also blocked by the interference, causing the KLM flight crew to miss both of these crucial messages. If either one of the messages had reached the KLM flight crew, they would have had time to abort takeoff and prevented this tragedy. Investigators also found the Pan Am aircraft had not followed instructions. They were instructed to turn off at the third exit C3, but due to weather conditions, they completely missed the turnoff. As the investigation unfolds, it would seem a perfect storm of uncontrollable factors, coincidences, and mistakes had caused this tragedy. Investigators concluded that the main cause for the accident was the captain of KLM Flight 4805 took off without proper clearance, with other major contributing factors such as the Pan Am aircraft missing their turnoff, limited visibility due to fog, and radio interference that caused communication breakdowns. With a total fatality count of 583, the Tenerife disaster remains the deadliest accident in aviation history. There are monuments in both Amsterdam and California in memory of those that died in the accident. So these are the 5 worst accidents in aviation history. Leave a comment below and let me know what you'd like to see in the future. I hope you enjoyed this video and I'll see you in the next one.